What if the man you once called a loser returned years later as the owner of your entire legacy? What if the one you tossed aside came back not for revenge, but to rescue everything you lost? This is not just another story about love and betrayal. It's a story of grit, humility, and the power of never giving up. In this real-life inspired tale, a man pushed out for being poor rises from heartbreak to become the CEO of the very company built by the family who discarded him. Watch until the end, because what happens in the final moments will stay with you long after the video ends. If you're into powerful transformation stories, undercover redemption, and dramatic real-world lessons, you're exactly where you need to be. Subscribe, share, and buckle up for one of the most emotional journeys you'll experience on this channel. It was supposed to be the happiest day of his life, the day every little boy secretly hopes for, but never admits out loud. The day he says, "I do," to the girl of his dreams. Ethan Carter stood in front of a narrow mirror in a small, borrowed room in Austin, Texas. He wore a dark blue suit that wasn't tailored, but it fit well enough. His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his tie for the fourth time. His best friend, Luca, leaned against the doorframe, sipping a Red Bull. "Man, you good? You're sweating like you just ran a marathon." Ethan forced a laugh, wiping his forehead with the back of his hand. "I'm fine. Just nervous." Luca tilted his head. "Cold feet?" Ethan shook his head slowly. "No, not that. I love Belle. I really do." He looked back at his reflection. But what if love isn't enough? Luca set his can down and walked over. "Bro, don't do that. Don't go there. She said yes, she chose you. That's what matters." Ethan gave a faint smile. "Her dad paid for everything, Luca. The venue, the suit, even the food." He paused. "What kind of man gets married in a suit bought by his future father-in-law?" Luca chuckled. "The kind that's going to be someone someday." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "You sound like a fortune cookie." They both laughed, but beneath that laughter, Ethan's heart felt like a balloon tied too tightly, ready to burst. Downstairs, guests were arriving. The garden was beautifully decorated. White chairs lined in perfect rows. The arch was wrapped in soft pink flowers. Fairy lights twinkled in the early evening sun. A soft instrumental track played on hidden speakers. It looked like something out of a movie. And maybe that's why it felt so surreal to Ethan, like he didn't belong in this scene. Like any moment now, someone might tap him on the shoulder and say, "Sorry, sir, you're in the wrong place." He closed his eyes, took a deep breath. "Please let this be right," he whispered. The door creaked open. It was Belle's cousin, Jamie. "Ethan, they're starting. You ready?" He nodded, more to convince himself than anyone else. "Yeah. Let's do this." As he stepped outside, the air smelled of roses and fresh linen. Everyone turned to look at him. Some smiled, some whispered. He walked slowly down the aisle, past rows of perfectly dressed guests. In the front row, Richard Monroe sat tall, arms crossed, his face unreadable. Belle's father, tech mogul worth millions, and not very good at hiding disappointment. Ethan avoided eye contact. He stood at the altar, waited. Then the music changed. Everyone stood, heads turned. There she was, Belle Monroe, glowing, golden, dressed in a flowing ivory gown that shimmered with every step. Her makeup was flawless, her expression less so. She smiled, but her eyes told a different story. She held her father's arm tightly. Ethan watched as Richard gave her hand a final squeeze before letting go. And for a brief second, it looked like she hesitated, just for a heartbeat. Then, she stepped forward, and suddenly they were face to face. The pastor cleared his throat. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today." The words faded in Ethan's mind. He could barely hear them. His eyes locked on Belle's, and all he could think was, "Please mean it when you say yes." Minutes passed like hours. "Ethan, do you take Belle?" "I do, with everything I am." Belle paused, glanced sideways. Her father's face remained stone cold. Then she turned back to Ethan. "I do, There was applause, music, laughter, but in Ethan's heart, the joy was mixed with dread. He leaned in and whispered, "Thank you for loving me, even if I don't have much." Belle gave a small nod, then looked away. That night, Ethan sat by the window of their new apartment. It wasn't much, just a space. Richard had loaned them for a year. Belle was asleep. The city lights flickered outside. Ethan opened his laptop, refreshed his inbox. Still no responses. He looked at his hands, the same ones that had built so many dreams in his head. "God," he whispered, "please don't. Let this be a mistake." And somewhere far away, in the city that never sleeps, a man with nothing had just married a woman with everything. And no one could say for sure if that was the start of a fairy tale or the beginning of a heartbreak waiting to happen. 2 months, that's how long the fairy tale lasted. 60 days after saying, "I do," the cracks began to show, and Ethan Carter found himself waking up more tired than when he went to bed. Each morning felt heavier, like the world was pressing down a little harder than the day before. He sat by the window again. Same laptop, same inbox, same silence. He had sent out 47 proposals to firms across Texas, some small, some big. No replies, not even a polite rejection. He stared at the screen until the words blurred, then he closed it again. In the kitchen, Belle was finishing her coffee. She looked perfect. She always did. Red blazer, gold watch, heels that clicked with confidence. "You're still in pajamas?" Her voice cut the quiet. Ethan blinked. "I sent out more proposals last night. Stayed up." "Ethan," she interrupted, "you've been sending out proposals for weeks." He opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. She grabbed her keys and bag. "I have a leadership briefing at 9. I can't be late." He stood up slowly. "Belle, I'm trying, I promise. I'm doing everything I can." She paused at the door, turned halfway. "Then maybe you should do more." And just like that, she was gone. The door closed gently, but it sounded like a slam to Ethan. Later that evening, Luca dropped by. He held up a brown bag, tacos and beer. "Emergency delivery." "You alive?" Ethan let out a dry chuckle. "Barely." They sat on the couch, the lights were dim, TV off. Luca handed him a taco. "So, what's the deal?" Ethan chewed slowly, swallowed. "She's tired. I get it, but sometimes it feels like she's tired of me." Luca leaned forward. Listen to me. You're not the problem. Unemployment is. Rejection is. But not you." Ethan looked away. "I just want her to see how hard I'm trying. Then keep pushing, but don't lose yourself while doing it." The next morning, Belle didn't say a word. Not when she passed him coffee. Not when she grabbed her bag. Not even when she left. And that silence said more than words ever could. By the end of the week, Ethan decided to take a risk. He drafted a special pitch, a design for a green tech co-working hub. His best work yet. Detailed, clean, professional. He planned to hand-deliver it to a boutique architecture firm in East Austin. He had no car, but Belle's second car, a blue hybrid, was in the garage. She hadn't used it in weeks. He hesitated, then whispered, "Just for today." He grabbed the keys and left a note on the counter. The meeting was at 10. He arrived at 9:50, waited in the lobby, practiced his lines silently. Then he was called in. The room was modern. A panel of 3 people sat at a glass table. Ethan stood tall, calm, focused. He began, "Thank you for seeing me. This design integrates sustainability with affordability." He flipped through slides on his tablet, explained timelines, budget, even community impact. The lead architect, Ms. Holloway, looked intrigued. "This is solid," she said. Ethan smiled. Then his phone buzzed. "Belle." He ignored it. It buzzed again. Then, again. He silenced it, but it vibrated nonstop. Ms. Holloway frowned. "You need to take that?" Ethan shook his head quickly. "No, ma'am, I'm here with you." But the tension was already there. The room felt tighter, His rhythm broke. He stumbled on his words. By the end, they thanked him and said they'd be in touch. But he knew he had lost the moment. Outside in the car, he checked his phone. 12 missed calls from Belle. A text. "Did you seriously take my car? Are you insane?" Another. "We'll talk when I get home." He drove back slowly, hands tight on the wheel, heart even tighter. When he walked through the door, Belle was already waiting. Her arms crossed, face sharp. "Who gave you permission to touch my car?" "I had." "Meeting?" "A big one. I needed to get there." "Get your own car, Ethan. This isn't yours to use." He swallowed. "I was this close to landing the contract. You calling me over and over?" She scoffed. "Don't blame me because you..." Choked. Something in him snapped. "I'm trying, Belle. Every single day. You think I enjoy this? You think I'm proud of where I am?" Her voice rose. "No. But I'm tired of being your safety net. I'm tired of watching you fail." Ethan stood, there, silent. She walked past him, grabbed her purse. "Next time, don't touch what doesn't belong to you." She left, and for the first time since the wedding, Ethan sat on the floor, alone, and truly questioned if love was ever enough to bridge the distance between expectations and reality. 3 days passed. The silence between them turned colder, like two strangers occupying the same air. Ethan spent hours in the corner office space of their apartment, sending new proposals, watching tutorials, tweaking floor plans. He barely ate. Barely. Slept. Belle barely spoke. Then came Sunday morning. He was on the floor, hunched over his laptop, wearing the same hoodie from the day before. When a knock echoed through the apartment, he stood up slowly, opened the door. It was Richard Monroe and 2 private security men, not police, not uniformed officers, but men who looked like they had training. Intimidation. "Ethan Carter," Richard said, his voice calm, too calm. "You need to leave this apartment, today." Ethan blinked. "Wait, what?" Belle appeared from the hallway, arms folded, eyes cold. "Dad, just do it." Richard sighed. "You've disrespected my daughter. You took property that isn't yours. And from what I hear, you've contributed nothing. Since the wedding." "Sir, I've been trying." Richard raised a hand. "This is not a discussion. You have 1 hour. Pack what belongs to you, or these gentlemen will do it for you." Ethan turned to Belle. "Belle, seriously." She didn't answer. She walked away. The security men stepped forward, and that was it. 1 hour later, Ethan stood on the sidewalk with a single suitcase, his phone, his laptop, and no place to go. He called. "Luca." It went straight to voicemail. He called Mia, she answered. "Ethan, what's wrong?" He tried to speak, but the words got stuck. Can I stay with you? Just for a few nights." "Of course, come over." He walked 10 blocks, dragging the suitcase behind him. It scraped against every bump and crack. The sun was setting, and so was his sense of worth. That night, Mia made pasta. He barely touched it. He sat on the couch, eyes blank. Mia handed him a blanket and let him be. The next morning, he woke up before the sun, sat at the dining table, opened his laptop, sent 3 proposals, then 5 more. No answers. His phone buzzed. An unknown number. He picked up. "Ethan Carter?" "Yes?" "This is Adriana from Urban Grid. We saw your concept. For the co-working hub. We're not taking bids right now, but someone forwarded us your file. We'd like to meet." Ethan blinked. "Really?" "Yes, are you available this week?" "Yes, absolutely, any day, any time." They agreed on Thursday. He hung up. His hands shook slightly, but for the first time in weeks, his heart didn't. That afternoon, Belle walked through her apartment, the silence now too loud. No soft humming from the corner, no coffee being poured, no Ethan. She sat on the couch, crossed her arms, stared at the door for hours, but no one came back through it. The next day, Richard came by. He looked around the space. "Still quiet?" Belle nodded. He sat beside her. "Sweetheart, you made the right call." She didn't answer, because a part of her wasn't so sure. But pride is a stubborn thing, and silence is its favorite companion. Meanwhile, in a tiny guest room on the other side of town, Ethan stood in front of a mirror wearing a shirt that didn't quite fit and a tie that Luca had left behind years ago. He looked at himself, not the broke man, not the rejected husband, but the architect who still had something to offer. He grabbed his portfolio and walked out the door, toward a meeting that might change everything. The elevator ride to the 12th floor felt longer than usual. Ethan stood there alone, the hum of the elevator a soft reminder that everything in his life had become quieter. He stepped into the office of Urban Grid, portfolio clutched in his hands, heart racing with every step. The receptionist gave him a polite smile. "They're ready for you, Mr. Carter." He nodded, his throat too dry to speak. Inside the meeting room, a panel of 3 professionals waited. Architects, project managers. One man with glasses scanned his file intently. Adriana, the woman who called, smiled kindly. "Ethan, thank you for coming. We reviewed your co-working concept." Ethan sat down slowly. "I appreciate the chance to share it in person." He walked them through the design, detail by detail, with calm, quiet confidence. He didn't oversell it. He didn't beg. He just showed them what he had worked so hard on. And when he finished, the room was silent for a few seconds. Then Adriana nodded. "We'll discuss internally. You'll hear from us soon." He thanked them, stood, and walked out with a strange feeling in his chest. Hope. It wasn't loud, but it was there. That night back at Mia's, he told her everything. She smiled, poured him a glass of wine, and for the first time since the wedding, he laughed, just a little, just enough. 2 days later, his phone rang. Urban Grid. He answered on the first ring. "Mr. Carter, we'd like to move forward with your design." He blinked. "Move forward?" "Yes, it's a full interior and exterior renovation. Budget is around $500,000. Are you up for it?" He almost dropped the phone. Absolutely. The next few weeks were a blur. Meetings, planning, blueprints. Ethan poured everything he had into it, worked day and night. He even hired 2 interns from the local college. He moved out of Mia's guest room, rented a small studio apartment, and slowly, piece by piece, he built his life again. Meanwhile, Belle sat in the same apartment. The quiet had turned into loneliness. Her friends stopped asking about Ethan. Her father had grown more distant, and work wasn't as exciting as it used to be. Every evening she returned home to the same silence. No laughter, no clinking of dishes in the sink, no late-night talks, just echoes of choices she couldn't undo. Then one day, she opened her social media feed. A photo, Ethan, standing in front of a completed project, Urban Grid's new workspace, dozens of comments, praise, shares, and a single caption, "From zero to something. All it takes is belief and one yes." She stared at the screen for a long time, didn't like it, didn't comment, just closed the app, and looked around the room again. Nothing had changed, but she had. Ethan's next project came quicker than expected. Another tech firm, then a cafe redesign. Word began to spread. He registered his own company, Carter Space. Designs, simple name, big heart. Clients loved his honesty, his work ethic, and slowly, so did the city. One night, Ethan stood by the window of his studio apartment, a city skyline blinking back at him. He whispered, "Thank you," not to anyone in particular, just to the universe for giving him a second chance. And in the silence of that small apartment, he realized something big. Sometimes the heart has to be emptied before it can finally be full. The city buzzed as always, but for Ethan Carter, life moved in still frames. He was back in motion, but every step felt like learning to walk again. His studio was tiny, yet it held something priceless: freedom. Every morning he made coffee from a second-hand French press and sat down to draw, not just for clients but for himself. New ideas, wild concepts, buildings that breathed with light and green. He was dreaming again. Then one afternoon, as he organized his files, his phone rang. "Luca, dude, I just saw your Urban Grid project on LinkedIn. You're killing it." Ethan smiled. Trying, man, just trying. Luca laughed. Don't be modest. My boss is obsessed with that redesign, wants to meet you. Ethan paused. You serious? Serious enough? To send you an invite, check your email. That night, Ethan sat at his desk staring at the offer. A new project, bigger budget, more visibility. It didn't even feel real. Mia popped her head into the studio. You okay? Ethan nodded slowly. Yeah, just overwhelmed, she grinned. That's what rising feels like. A week later, he stood inside a massive loft space in downtown Austin. A new client, new blueprints, a team of 5 under his guidance. He was no longer just a freelancer. He was a leader, a builder, and maybe for the first time, he was becoming the man he always wanted to be. One night after a long meeting, he stopped by a local community college. He gave a guest lecture, talked about setbacks, failure, starting from nothing. A student raised their hand. How do you know when you're finally succeeding? Ethan paused. When you stop needing to prove yourself to people who never saw your worth. The room went quiet. Heads nodded. He left the class that night, feeling something powerful. Peace. Meanwhile, Belle walked past a window downtown, stopped, looked up, saw the new signage, Carter Space Designs. She blinked, felt her chest tighten. Didn't go in, didn't call. She just walked on. Back home. Her apartment felt too clean, too quiet. She sat on the couch, turned the TV on, then off again. Outside, the world moved fast, but inside her home, time stood still. Ethan's next project was out of town. A lakeside community hub. He traveled with his team, worked under the sun, ate local food, laughed by bonfires. He journaled every night. One entry read, I thought I needed revenge to heal. Turns out I just needed purpose. Months passed. His company grew. New office, more staff, internships. He started a mentorship program, gave small grants to struggling architecture students. One morning, a journalist called. We'd like to do a feature on Carter Space Designs. Your story is inspiring. Ethan agreed, but only on one condition. Make it about the journey, not the pain. The article went viral. From couch to construction king, the rise of Ethan Carter. Belle read it from her phone. Lying alone, she exhaled slowly and whispered, I never saw this coming. But Ethan had, maybe not the fame or the fortune, but the becoming, the rising like a phoenix from ashes she once left behind. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon when Ethan received the call. A voice he didn't recognize. Mr. Carter? This is Daniel with Capital Trust Auctions. He furrowed his brow. Yes? We're handling the liquidation of Monroe Innovations. Ethan froze. Come. Again? The company is being sold off. You're on our watch list as a qualified bidder. Would you like to join the auction? He didn't speak for a few seconds. Monroe Innovations, Belle's family company, her father's pride. He cleared his throat. Yes, send me the details. That night, he sat in his office, folder open, the company profile glaring back at him. Assets, liabilities, auction date, 1 week. He leaned back, looked up at the ceiling and whispered, What are the odds? Meanwhile, Belle sat across from a loan officer, tears barely hidden. We can't hold the building any longer, the woman said kindly. The debts your father left behind. Belle nodded. I understand. She walked out with a heavy heart, folder clutched tightly in her arms. At home, she stood in the middle of the living room, surrounded by pieces of a life she was losing, pictures on the wall, books her father once read. It all felt borrowed now, temporary. The day of the auction came. A large hall, polished floors, glass walls, men and women in suits, whispers and coffee in hand. Belle arrived alone, sat near the back. She kept her head low. The auctioneer stepped up. Next up, Monroe. Innovations. Starting bid $400,000. A hand rose. Then another $420, $450, $500. It climbed steadily. Then a new voice entered. $1 million. The room hushed, all heads turned. Belle's heart skipped. She recognized that voice. The auctioneer blinked. $1 million. Do I hear more? Silence. going once, going twice. He slammed the gavel. Sold to Mr. Ethan Carter. Bell stood up slowly, stared at the man who now walked forward, calm, strong, focused. He signed the paperwork, thanked the auction staff, and turned to leave. Bell stepped in front of him. "Ethan," he stopped, met her eyes. "You bought my father's company," he nodded. "Yes, I did. Why? After everything, why?" He looked at her, not with anger, not with pain, but with clarity. "Because I could, and because they needed someone to save it." Bell's voice trembled. "Was it revenge?" Ethan shook his head. "No, that's not my story anymore." He took a breath. "Your father never believed in me. You didn't either, but I believed in myself, and now so do others." She looked down. "I didn't know you'd become this. You didn't care to wait." He stepped around her gently. "Take care, Belle," and walked out. Outside, the sun had finally broken through the clouds, and as he stepped into his car, Ethan Carter didn't feel triumphant. He felt settled, balanced. He didn't win because she lost. He won because he refused to stay broken. And sometimes that's the most powerful revenge of all. A week passed after the auction. Ethan got back to work, now overseeing the transition of Monroe Innovations under his leadership. He kept the name, out of respect for the team, not for the family. He walked through the office halls, met with department heads, reassured employees. No mass layoffs, no restructuring shock, just stability. And for once, those halls were filled with hope, not whispers of uncertainty. Back in her apartment, Belle sat at the kitchen table, a letter in her hands. It was from one of her father's former board members, a polite note of sympathy, and a final reminder. The world remembers how we treat people, especially when we think they can't give us anything in return. That line hit her like thunder. She looked out the window. The world kept spinning. Jobs, projects, headlines. Ethan S. name now appeared on magazine covers. Resilient Architect of the Year, Man of Vision, from couch to CEO. And Belle? She sat in silence, a silence she created. She picked up her phone, typed his name into the search bar, watched a short video of him speaking at a university. "Never underestimate quiet people," he said. "They're often the ones building something you'll need one day." The audience clapped. Belle didn't. She just watched. Let the tears come silently. She thought about calling, thought about apologizing, but she didn't. She couldn't find the words. And maybe he didn't need them anymore. Months later, Monroe Innovations launched a mentorship program in partnership with Carter Space Designs, helping young professionals from low-income backgrounds, giving them resources, training, a shot. Ethan stood on stage. At the launch, Luca by his side, Mia cheering from the front row. "This is not just about me," he told the crowd. "It's about everyone who was ever overlooked, everyone who was told no but kept going." He paused. Because respect and humility, they're not weaknesses, they're foundations. The crowd stood. Applause echoed across the auditorium. Outside, the sun warmed the pavement, and somewhere in the distance Belle watched from the live stream, not as the girl who once had everything, but as the woman who finally understood what she had thrown away. The screen faded to black, and the story of pain, of perseverance, of growth, came to an end. But its lesson still echoes. Never look down on someone just because they're struggling. Because one day, they might be the very person you wish you had held on to. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs a reminder that today's setbacks don't define tomorrow's legacy. And there you have it. A story that started with rejection and ended in redemption. One man's fall from grace became the very foundation of his rise to power, and the woman who once had everything was left only with memories and a heart full of regrets. If this didn't move you to feel something, anger, inspiration, maybe even forgiveness, go back and watch again. Because sometimes the people we walk away from are the ones destined to become unshakable. Let this be your reminder. Never judge someone by the chapter you walked in on. And never forget, kindness costs nothing but cruelty. It could cost you everything. If this story touched you, leave a comment. Let us know the moment that hit you hardest, and don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs to remember that struggle doesn't mean defeat. It means you're still in the fight. Until next time, stay kind, stay strong, and remember, every underdog has their day.